What's up, Pathways Church? Welcome to today's Daily Dose. I'm Nathan Purifoy, your worship pastor. I'm super excited to be sharing with you a story about giant faith. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a different story than usual. This is actually a story where we're going to go in 2 Kings chapter 13. There's a story about a man who had very little faith, because the main character of the story today is you and your giant faith. So we're going to look back at this, and we're going to see what we can learn about having giant faith. In 2 Kings chapter 13, there's a king named Jehoash. And Jehoash, it goes to see a prophet named Elisha. He's going to talk to Elisha right before Elisha dies. He's really sick. And Jehoash is trying to get one last piece of advice, one last word from the Lord, one last encouragement, one last bit of support. And this is what Elisha shares with him. Elisha said, "Get a bow and some arrows." So the king did so. "Take the bow in your hands," he said to the king of Israel. When he had taken it, Elisha put his hand on the king's hands. "Open the east window," he said, and he opened it. "Shoot," and he shot. "The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram," Elisha declared. "You will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek." Then he said, "Take the arrows," and the king took them. Elisha told him, "Strike the ground." He struck the ground 3 times and stopped. The man of God was angry with him and said, "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you'll defeat Aram only 3 times. Imagine being the one given that instruction to take a bundle of arrows and strike the ground. You don't know why. You don't know how many times. All you know is that you're supposed to be taking a bundle of arrows and striking the ground. This is most likely something that you've never done before. We're going to jump to a really quick story. This is a picture of me as an awkward teenager. And this is what I look like through an awkward phase. Now, here's what I did when I was an awkward teenager is I continued to stay awkward at a very high level for a pretty long time. But I pushed through it, and now you have this super awesome version of me today that you see every single week on stage. I'm still awkward sometimes, just to be fair. So whenever I think of this king like smacking the ground with these arrows, I think of how awkward that must have been. Like, you want me to do what? Why am I doing this? I got it just a second ago when you told me to shoot an arrow out the window. I've shot an arrow 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. I've shot so many arrows. I've never just taken a bunch of them and struck the ground. And I definitely don't know why you want me to do it now. Here's the thing, though, is the obedience and the faith that it takes to do this and to completely dedicate yourself to what seems like a really small, unimportant, insignificant task. To take arrows and strike them on the ground. For what? Am I trying to break the arrows? Am I trying to break the ground? Why am I even doing this? He does it 3 times. I imagine he was kind of like, okay, strike, strike, strike. There you go. Now what? That's what I assume it was like. But what if he had just completely dedicated himself to those instructions? What if he had grabbed the arrows and he just completely went for it like a madman? He leaned into the fact that it might be a little awkward, but who cares? I'm doing what God is telling me to do right now. Why don't we do that sometimes? Why don't we lean into the strange things that we feel like God is telling us to do? Why don't we sing a little louder when there's worship music playing, or put our hands up a little higher, or move just a little bit in our seat? And maybe something like that, an action that we're able to take, moves God's heart. So then God takes action in our lives. What if it's talking to the neighbor that you don't feel comfortable talking to, calling your son or your daughter that you don't feel comfortable calling and confronting them about something, talking to your spouse, talking to your boss, talking to a coworker? What if it's giving money to somebody, the homeless guy you see on the side of the street? What if it's taking something to that family that you know is in need? Those awkward things that we could easily dedicate ourselves to. I want to encourage you guys to have giant faith. Not to be like this king who awkwardly strikes 3 times, but people that commit to what God tells us to do. We'll see you tomorrow on the Daily Dose.